All right, so now we are going to look at dividing complex numbers. We're just asked to simplify and write our terms in a plus bi form, and remember to reduce all fractions. So let's go ahead and start with number 1. We've got negative 3i divided by negative 4i. Well, what we know first off is I divided by I is actually 1, because we're just saying a number divided by itself is always 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a 1, and my answer would be negative 3 divided by negative 4, which we know is just 3 over 4. So look at number 2. We've got negative 7i divided by I. Same issue. Any number divided by itself reduces to 1. So what we have left is just negative 7. Number 3, we've got 1 not multiplied, but divided by 2i. Now notice we don't have an I on the top, so we can't use the strategy that we used in number 1 and 2, but what we do is we never want an imaginary number in the denominator. So the only way to get it out of the denominator is to multiply by that imaginary number. You don't have to multiply by the whole thing, just the I. So I'm going to multiply by I in the numerator and by I in the denominator. And when I do that, what happens is I get 1 times I, which is I. 2i times I is 2i squared. And we already know that I squared is negative 1. So this would end up being I lost my train of thought, I'm so sorry, over negative 2. But instead of writing it like that, we would write 1 over 2. You can put the negative out to the side or within the 2, and the I goes to the right. So we would have 1 over 2. And here I would put the I, and let me not forget the negative. All right, let's go ahead and look at the next one, which we're going to call number 4. We've got 1 divided by 9i. We're going to multiply by I on both sides, not both sides of the equation, but in the numerator and the denominator. I think I'm going to write this way. So I've got I over 9i squared. What we know, now I'm going to go down, is that we've got 1 on the top. I squared is negative 1, so negative 1 times 9 is negative 9. And then I'm going to put my I out here to the side. So you're going to see me type it in like this though. Negative 1 over 9i. All right, our next question is 3 divided by I. So we are simply going to, again, multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. That gives us 3 times I is 3i. I times I is I squared, which we know to be negative 1. So we've got 3i over negative 1, right? So we're not going to write it like that. We're going to write negative 3, negative 1. Because remember, we have to simplify it. So don't get tricked into thinking, oh, I've got a negative 1 down here and I'm all done. No, you're not. So 3 divided by negative 1 is negative 3, and then put your I out there. Let's look at number 6. We've got negative 9, excuse me, divided by 5i. Multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. That gives us negative 9i divided by 5i squared. So we've got negative 9i. We know I squared is negative 1. So negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Let's go ahead and simplify. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we've got 9 over 5, and put your I out to the side. right, let's look at number 7. Now this one is a little bit different. If you notice, there's a binomial on top. In other words, we've got two terms joined together by a plus. So we are going to use our process that we've been using, but what's different about this is that we are going to have to distribute our I to both terms in the numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and include that with parentheses to remind myself to do that. And then I'm going to multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. Now this time I'm going to write, I'll write below. So I've got I times negative 5, and that gives me negative 5I. And then I multiplied by 4I gives me positive 4I squared. In the denominator, I've got I multiplied by negative 5I, which gives me negative 5I squared. And we're going to just keep simplifying. So we've got negative 5I. We know that I squared is negative 1. So we're going to say negative 1 times positive 4 is negative 4. Now in the denominator, I've got I squared, which is negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 5 is positive 5. Now you might be tempted to leave it like this. However, you have to remember that you have both an imaginary and a real part. So you have to write this equation as such. And when we do that, when you have that single denominator, we're going to break these into pieces. So what I've got is negative 4 over 5. That's my real part. And then here, I'm going to do my imaginary part, which is minus, I'm taking that from right here, 5I over 5. Now, think about that. What is 5I over 5? Isn't that the same as saying 1I? Hopefully you said yes. So this would be actually 4 over 5 minus I. So let's go ahead and put that in. Now you and I are both about to see something here. We are brilliant. All right. All right, our next question is negative 4 plus I divided by negative 3I. So again, we are going to multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. This is not a 2, this is an I. I'm going to try to do better with that. Okay, so we've got I multiplied by negative 4, which is negative 4I. And then we've got I multiplied by I, which is positive I squared. And then in the denominator, we've got I multiplied by negative 3I, which is negative 3I squared. So let's continue to simplify. We've got negative 4I, I squared is negative 1. And then on the bottom here in the denominator, we've got negative 3, I squared is negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. So we're going to write our real part, which is negative 1/3. I'm getting that negative from right here. And then minus, because we're going to do the imaginary part now, 4/3 I. All right, moving right along. Number 9, we've got 5 plus I divided by negative 3I. We're going to multiply by I in the numerator and the denominator. Remember, we are distributing that I because this looks like a binomial. So I times 5 is 5I. I times I is I squared. And then negative 3I times I is negative 3I squared. So we've got 5I. I squared is negative 1. And then we've got, again, I squared is negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. We're going to write our real part first. 1 over 3, and we know it's negative because of this sign. But this time our imaginary part is positive, so we're going to put a plus sign here. And that would be 5 over 3 I. Now, on number 10, you might notice it's a little bit different. In all the problems before, or I should say a couple of problems before, the binomial has been on the top or in the numerator. This time, the binomial's in the denominator. So that changes our process a little bit. What we're going to do now is multiply by the conjugate. And if you remember, the conjugate just simply says leave the imaginary part, please excuse me, leave the real part the same, and you're going to write the imaginary part with an opposite sign. So if you notice here, I have -5 minus 5i. Well, my conjugate is -5 plus 5i. So now we're going to do what we have been doing. On the top, we're going to distribute that 1 to the numerator, but on the bottom, we're going to use what we use in multiplying complex numbers, distributive property or FOIL, whichever you prefer to call it. So let's go ahead and go. We've got 1 times -5, which is -5. 1 times 5i is positive 5i. That's the numerator. We're done with that. Now let's work on the denominator. -5 times -5 is positive 25. -5 times positive 5i is negative 25i. Negative 5i times -5 is positive 25i. Negative 5i times positive 5i is negative 25i squared. So if you notice, our numerator is going to be the same, -5 plus 5i, but our denominator right here in the middle, notice that they're opposite signs, right? And so that means that they're eliminated. And we're left with, in the denominator, 25 minus 25i squared. Now let's continue. What we know is that our numerator stays the same. And we know that we've got 25 here, but I squared is -1. So -1 times -25 is positive 25. Let's go ahead and continue simplifying. We've got -5 plus 5i. Well, 25 plus 25 is 50. And we need to simplify. So -5 divided by 50. Well, we know 5 goes into both terms. So we're going to just reduce that. And that ends up being -1 over 10. And then here, 5i over 50. We're going to reduce that. Well, 5 goes into 5 once. So that leaves us I. And 5 goes into 50 10 times. So here's our answer. It is -1 over 10 plus, well, instead of saying I over 10, let me correct that. It's -1 over 10. Now, remember, there's an imaginary 1 in front of that I. So we're going to put plus 1 over 10 I. All right, we're going to continue. So let's look at number 11. It looks exactly like number 10. So we've got -2 divided by -3 plus I. We're going to multiply by the conjugate, which gives us -3 minus I. All right, let's go. -2 times -3 is positive 6. -2 times -I is positive 2I. So that's done on the numerator. Then we're going to distribute or do FOIL, whichever you call it, on the bottom. So -3 times -3 is positive 9. -3 times -I is positive 3I. Positive I times -3 is -3I. And then I times -I is -I squared. Let's continue to simplify. So 6 plus 2I. And what we notice again is that our middle two terms are opposite signs, same coefficient. So they eliminate each other. And we're left with 9 minus I squared. Well, I forgot the I on I squared is -1. So minus -1, that's like saying 9 plus 1. So we have 6 plus 2I, and this would be 10. So we'll continue. Well, 6 over 10, we can simplify that by dividing by 2. So this would give us 3 over 5. And then here, we're dividing by 2 again. So that would give us plus 1 over 5, and put your I out there. Okay, just a few more to go. All right, we've got -4 divided by -3 with my little minus sign there, I. We're multiplying by the conjugate, which is -3 plus I. Let's go ahead and get to it. -4 times -3 is positive 12. -4 times positive I is -4I. And then on the bottom, we've got -3 times -3, which is positive 9. -3 times positive I is -3I. Negative I times -3 is positive 3I. And then I times I, or negative